So first, we're going to do some quick introductions. My name is Arthur Kolker. I am the founder and CEO of StayFi, which is a Wi-Fi, email, and guest marketing software built for the short-term rental industry. And then I'll hand it over to Conrad to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Arthur. Excited to be here today. Conrad O'Connell, founder of BuildUp Bookings. We're a digital marketing agency that works specifically with short-term and vacation rentals.
And I am Amber Prickett with PriceLabs. I've been a solutions consultant at PriceLabs for, I think, a little over 4 years now. And we are primarily known for our dynamic pricing solution, but we are a full revenue management software.
And I'm Eddie Love. I founded Mountain Mama in 2018. We're a vacation rental company with 30 properties in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, which is largely a drive-to market for the Washington, D.C. area and the Mid-Atlantic.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So today is going to be really exciting because not only are we going to be able to talk about all the different strategies as it relates to driving direct bookings, what's been changing over the last few years, we actually have a fantastic short-term rental operator, Eddie, who is joining us. So everything we'll talk about, we can also relate back to what he's doing in his business to be successful in direct bookings, and he'll share some of his own tips and tricks that he's found successful building this business over the last 5 to 10 years, but I'm sure Eddie will give full backstory of the brand. So we'll kind of do a quick overview first of the state of direct bookings today. Then we're going to talk about the different ways to increase your direct bookings, whether it's what Eddie has done successfully, in general, how to approach pricing, digital marketing, data collection, email marketing, all the things that we all specialize in. Then we'll give some case studies, real life examples, and then of course we will have plenty of time for Q&A. So first we'll kick off with the state of direct bookings in 2026. And so I'll preface this by just giving a little background on why are operators looking to drive more direct bookings in general. I think number one that we hear, at least here at StayFi, is they want more control over their brand and they want to reduce the commissions that they are paying to the OTAs. I don't know, Conrad, kind of like what do you find are the top reasons people are coming to you to build out their brand and drive more bookings for their business directly?
I think some of the more common talking points over the last few years, there's nothing new there, I would say. Like everything you just said is accurate, everything on the screen is accurate. I feel like a lot of markets, though, this isn't exactly, I would say, Eddie's case necessarily, but some other clients we work with are really just demand constrained. They just literally do not have enough demand coming from the OTAs in general to fill their properties to like a satisfactory level of occupancy. So if you're demand constrained and you just genuinely don't have enough bookings to go around, you need kind of both channels working, right? Ideally, you have Airbnb working in your favor. Ideally, you have Vrbo, Booking.com working in your favor. But if you can add in direct and get even more bookings coming in, that's where I think a lot of operators are, particularly if you're in a market that's heavily saturated and has lots of listings. Like you kind of have to stand out from the crowd a little bit. And if your market's seeing a drop in demand and an increase in supply, as so many have, I think direct is one of your ways where you can actually just kind of get back to level a little bit of what your expectations are or what your projections need to be to keep that homeowner happy and, kind of keep going forward and signing more inventory in the future.
And then for you, Eddie, was there a particular pain point or moment that you remember where you realized that you wanted to pursue building a brand or drive direct bookings, or is it something you always knew that you wanted to do as part of your business?
It is not something that I always knew I wanted to do, and I'll speak more to this when we get to kind of our brand story. But I'm one of those newer operators that started as like an Airbnb, and was pretty exclusively on Airbnb. And Airbnb, made me aware of the category even. And so initially, when we started, we were just on Airbnb, but as after a year or two of that, I could see how we didn't have complete control of like the entire guest journey. We didn't have control of the guest data. And while Airbnb was bringing us bookings, I just, was a little uneasy about the fact that our entire company was being built on someone else's platform, which they could turn us off whenever they wanted to. And I'm sure we've all heard horror stories of that exact situation. And so for us, it was just a matter of shifting some of our dependence away from the OTAs, which again can be hugely valuable. And you really ought to be marketing through the OTAs. But to be 100% reliant on someone else's business, you know, just didn't sit well with me. And so that was a big part of the reason we diversified. And everything else that's listed on the slide here is true as well.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that's probably, all of those reasons are what we definitely hear. And so I think the thing people might be surprised by when we look at like direct bookings industry wide today is that they actually, for most size of property managers or operators, their share of direct bookings has been falling and is continuing to fall. So if you look on the right, we have some data from Key Data, and you can see here. This is divided by the different property manager or operator size. And you can see in the smallest segment here that they track, which is 10 to 49 properties, the share of all bookings that is direct went up 1 percentage point to 12%, still pretty small. And then for all the other size categories, it's falling. But of course, what's also not surprising here is as operators get bigger, their share of direct bookings is larger. So that's definitely a trend we see where larger, more established property managers, typically who dominate one market, are the most successful at direct bookings. And then industry wide, it's about 34%. But we've seen that fall over the last few years, and Airbnb is the share of from the OTAs that is rising the fastest. Conrad, is there anything you want to add here or Amber?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said, I wanted to cite, you said it a second ago. Yeah, for key data dashboard, the data that we had here, because I'd never seen this data broken out. I'd always seen aggregate data, like you mentioned in the first bullet point there. Maybe the average is that 34% number, which is accurate. But then if you look at it, you realize, yes, one of the best ways to get more direct bookings is to get bigger. But this is also across a pretty large, sample set. If you have 40 properties in a market like Destin or Myrtle Beach, it's not really the same as having 40 in Harpers Ferry, as Eddie can attest to. He has a significant portion, really, of the professionally managed inventory in his market because just the inventory spread isn't as wide. So yeah, I think the key is like we're kind of talking about here, getting bigger. And I wouldn't look at this trend and be like, oh, there's no way to get a lot of direct bookings. There are absolutely tons of outliers. We work with clients that have 3 listings that get 80% direct bookings, but typically as the properties are very unique. So I think a lot of what you're seeing here too is just perhaps a letting go of the wheel, Airbnb take the wheel sort of mindset that's gone on a little bit with a lot of operators. And yeah, I think it takes a lot of effort and energy and work, let's be honest, right, to get more direct bookings. But you can see that the companies that do well and get large and end up scaling their business typically focus on direct and make it a priority because they realize the benefits that come from that and their overall business health. So
Yeah. I mean, I think as Conrad mentioned, it's very, everyone's always asking like, what's a good number? What should my goal be? But it's so market dependent. The types of guests that you have and the type of market you in is also going to dictate how easy or hard it may be to drive direct bookings. And obviously, if you're in a market with a lot of repeat traffic, it's easy to turn those guests into repeat bookers versus a place where people only visit once in a lifetime. It can be harder to at least track bookings on the repeat side, although maybe on the new guest side, there are some strategies Conrad will talk about that we can deploy. So when it comes to moving, uh, how to be successful today, I thought we'd start with Eddie just kind of giving a little background of where he started and then how the process has been to getting his bookings or direct bookings to now where it is today, where there's over $1 million in direct bookings in the last 12 months.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, we founded Mountain Mama in 2018. And pretty typical founder story, we bought a cabin out in this area and we couldn't really find anyone to manage it or anyone that we were confident in. And so we started managing that one cabin ourselves. And that went well. We felt like we had a knack for for hospitality. And so we bought a second cabin the year after that in 2019. And then from there, as we came into the pandemic years, we transitioned from owning properties to actually managing properties for other homeowners. So that's the vast majority of what we do now. We still just own the two properties, and then we have 28 other properties, which are part of the management portfolio. And again, early on, we just listed on Airbnb. We were exclusively sourcing our bookings through there. but felt this need to diversify to not be totally reliant on just one channel. And so we added VRBO pretty quickly after that. And then added, a couple other smaller channels, but it became clear that direct booking was going to be a big opportunity if we could really devote some resources and attention to it. So the first step was just to get a direct booking website up. And so that's, step number one. If you do not have a direct booking website today, you need one. And even if that's just kind of an out of the box website from your PMS, start there. And so that's what we did. Our first website was just, a PMS site, but it got us out there. It enabled us to start taking very slowly our first direct bookings. Now, without any kind of marketing behind it, the direct bookings were very slow. We were definitely in that category of 10 to 50 property operators that had 10% or less, like we saw on the slides previously. We were probably single digit percentages when it came to direct bookings for that first year or two. And at that point, Conrad, I can't remember how long we've been working together. It's been years now, maybe 4 or 5 years. And actually, we were early adopters with StayFi. We've been using PriceLabs for years. And so I can, personally attest to all the different partners we have on the call right now. They've all been important pieces of our own direct booking strategy and our growth there. So once we had the direct booking website in place, we needed to add some marketing to it. And so that's when Conrad came on as a partner. And I think Conrad, you'll speak to this later, but a multifaceted marketing approach, which includes paid ads, and includes a lot of SEO and blog content on the site to make our website, rank higher and be more relevant to people as they are searching for things to do when they're coming to Harpers Ferry, when they're coming to West Virginia. Email marketing is another big prong, and with the email marketing, when you're first starting, especially if you're reliant just on OTA bookings, you really don't have those guest emails. And so you need some way of capturing those guest emails and, operationalizing that flow from collecting a guest email to adding that to a guest marketing platform to regularly sending newsletters and staying in touch with them. So StayFi comes in as that piece for collecting guest emails when guests are at the property so that you can continue to remarket to them after the fact. So between StayFi and BuildUp Bookings, we started this direct booking engine, which didn't lead to success overnight. But incrementally, year over year, we started to see significant direct booking traffic, significant growth in the direct booking channel. Today, we get a little over 30% of our bookings direct, probably 30 to 35%. And it's just been a steady climb from low single digits when we first started any kind of direct booking strategy, and probably late 2019 coming into 2020. And it's just required, dedicated dedicating resources to this, executing on a direct booking strategy and sticking with it. So yeah, I guess that's probably enough of an overview from us right now. I will say with PriceLabs and with pricing, again, we are users of PriceLabs, have been for years. I think it's the best pricing software out there. When it comes to direct booking, though, like the one thing to note on price is that you should always be sure that your price booking directly is going to be cheaper than what a guest is going to find on an OTA anywhere else. You need to give guests a reason to book directly with you, even if they first find you somewhere else. One way to do that is with price. And there are other levers, like for example, you can offer a slightly more flexible cancellation policy with your direct bookings than you do with your OTA bookings, just to give an example. But you want to find ways to sweeten the deal a little bit so that if people do find you directly and then go and look and find you on Airbnb also, they have no reason at all to book on Airbnb. You want them booking on your website. Um, yeah, so I will leave it at that for the brand story.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And as we move more to talk about the website specifically, I'm just curious, Eddie, do you take many bookings not over the website? So do you take bookings like over the phone or via email, or are you driving everybody through the website to make the direct booking typically?
For the most part, we're driving everyone through the website. I would say we do occasionally take bookings over the phone or like outreach through a contact us form on our website.
Hmm.
But generally, even when we get those, we are putting those, we might put it directly into the PMS and then send a link to make payment and finalize it. We're never taking like credit card numbers over the phone. So
Totally.
even with phone inbound inquiries, we're still immediately either pushing them to the website or plugging them straight into our PMS.
And looking at the website homepage, I will just point out the two things here that I love and that I always want to make sure that people have is number one, I know where this operator is located. I cannot tell you how many websites we come across where it's like Mountain Mama, something, a name like that, but then it doesn't have a destination, which can be confusing because you actually have to go look at the homes. And then down below, you can see there is a persistent uh, rationale about why you should book direct. Like what is the value? And there's that save 10 to 20% when you book direct. And then actually when you click on here is why I don't have it here, but there's a nice pop-up that explains the fees that the OTAs take. So after this call, I would definitely recommend going to mountainmamacabins.com and checking out Eddie's website because it is a great example of what a website could look like. And I'm just curious, Eddie, who did you use a company to build this website, or did you guys build it yourself, or how did
Yeah,
that?
so this website, the one with the screenshot there, was built by Hudson Creative. Ellie's the man over there, and that was a really positive experience. Have great things to say about the Hudson Creative team. Not only because the websites I think look beautiful, he transitioned us from a different website. And well, let me take a step back and kind of go through the website journey a little bit. So, like I indicated earlier, when we first set up a direct booking website, it was just with the PMS, and we use Hostfully for our PMS, and it was just with their out of the box website. A lot of these PMSs have, you can just quickly toggle something on. You've got a direct booking website, and that's great as a first step. But then from there, we had another company in the space build us a direct booking website, which we used for several years, and it worked for us. This was probably in like 2021 to 2024, I think, that we had that other website, and it was good. We built a lot of our search rankings and a lot of our content that drives has driven a lot of our organic search volume. We built it on that website, and it was a good solution for us at the time. The one thing that site lacked for us, though, was really good granular tracking. So we wanted to be able to log into Google Analytics and see exactly where all of our bookings were coming from, follow them through the funnel, see what's feeding the top of the funnel the most, but then better understand actually like how do those top of funnel leads convert, which of those turn into bookings, at what rates, and that helped us to understand where do we allocate more of our marketing budget. So for years we were flying blind a little bit without good hard data on that. And we believed in the strategy enough to stick with it, but it didn't let us really optimize our marketing dollars and put money to the sources that were actually converting well. So so now this is like fall 2024. We worked with Ellie and the team at Hudson to put together this beautiful website, which also has very good, robust tracking on the back end. And so now we just have a lot more visibility into not just where are customers coming to us, how are they finding our website, but then also which of them are converting and what's the direct booking dollar value associated with those leads.
Yeah, and the key thing for everybody here to make sure they ask for from a website company is, yes, you want Google Analytics, but you want to make sure you don't just have Google Analytics, that you have the e-commerce tracking as part of Google Analytics. And some people will say they have Google Analytics, but they don't have the key e-commerce tracking piece. So since Conrad, since you spend a lot of time obviously in Eddie's Google Analytics, maybe just talk a little bit about the traffic data here and how traffic source and its quality in terms of bookings can vary greatly, depending on who you're working with and what they're doing.
Yeah, I think Eddie had a good description of kind of the timeline of events. I had to go look it up, by the way, Eddie, what month we started together because I forgot it had been some time. July 2022. So there we go. That's how long this journey has been. But anyways, to go back to your original question there, Arthur. Yeah, I think the tracking and like the fidelity of that information is so important. I was working with another vendor literally yesterday who does have the e-commerce tracking hooked up, but they don't have everything split out. So like even within e-commerce tracking, you can sit there and get really granular, right? And the way that the Hudson Creative sites work. I keep mixing between Hum Runner and Hudson Creative, but the way that Ellie does it is really strong because actually when the booking comes through, he actually puts through each of the revenue amounts in separate line items. So rent, taxes, fees, all that kind of stuff. And there was actually a question in the chat. Maybe I could kind of kill multiple birds with one stone if you're cool with that, Arthur. Here, it was a Sarah M that asked this question, and she was asking like who wins on a direct booking is in talking about, well, the rate that I'm getting, on my website, if it's that much cheaper, is it really that financially lucrative for me to get the direct booking? And I think that, Eddie and I haven't gone as deep on this as some of our other clients have. I think there's a lot of arguments to be had for having a reservation fee or direct booking fee on your website that covers some of that gap, but not all of it. So you mentioned a few minutes ago, Arthur, this idea of the direct booking website should be the cheapest option. I agree. I just don't think you have to give up all your margin. I think you could perhaps pick a number between 5 and 8% and have a so-called guest fee or reservation fee on the website. And then that'll actually help you build some of your marketing budget so that you can then, because regardless of if you do marketing with me or you do it yourself or you hire some other freelancer agency, whatever, marketing costs money. It's either going to cost your time or it's going to cost actual hard dollars in the case of running things like Google Ads and stuff like that. So you need to have that kind of built into your model of how am I going to generate each transaction, make enough revenue and enough profit, on my side of the booking, on my side of the ledger, so that I can continue to do more marketing. And that's how you make your business more sustainable and you make direct bookings something you can invest, frankly, thousands of dollars a month into, which you'll have to do at some point as you get larger. So to tie in the traffic sources of like what works the best for Mountain Mama, I think that was kind of a secondary question that someone had asked. How do you go from 10 to 30%? The biggest win I would say for Eddie has been the organic search traffic. And we started with it in a very straightforward way by just doing lots of blog content articles about all the activities, things to do, attractions, information about Harper's Ferry. What's unique about Eddie, and I think what made his case study here pretty compelling, is that he has a defined geographic area. I think this is super hard to do if you have 10 properties in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and then 10 properties in Sedona, Arizona. Both great markets, but I think that's really, really challenging to build direct booking and build brand when you have two completely different markets. We could have a discussion or debate about regional traffic, but like in Eddie's case, he's so defined about what kind of guest he's going after and what market that he's in that it makes all of our efforts here on getting more paid search traffic in the door, getting more organic search traffic in the door, much more effective than maybe some people who are a little bit more split. Or this is kind of the terminology that I use on some of the stuff that I talk about. The inventory in Eddie's website, if you go and look at it, has congruency. Like you could see someone choosing between the different options on his website. So not only within his market, he's got some variety in terms of like quality of home and size of home and things like that, which is great. But as you look at the site, he has a standard that he holds, homeowners to. He enforces that standard and it makes the traffic convert better, of the bullet points you're seeing on the screen. So those are small points, like not all traffic is made equal. And then once they get to the website, they behave differently depending on what properties they're presented, photography, a lot of other factors, contribute, I think, to Eddie's success with direct. So organic has been super key. Direct traffic is always a funny one. I know we're talking about all direct bookings today, but what I always say is like, no one woke up this morning, typed in mountainmamacabins.com, hit enter, and gives Eddie $2,000 for no reason, right? A lot of so-called direct traffic is kind of previous guest traffic. It's brand awareness from doing ads on other platforms like Meta, Facebook, Instagram, Google, et cetera. And then people just recall the brand and they go, oh, I know who I want to stay with. I know who I want to book with. And then they make, a direct website visit and then make a reservation. But all direct traffic is sort of just attributed to like marketing efforts, but it's something we often struggle with to attribute exactly to like, where did that come from? What's interesting about the next two channels that I would kind of say for Eddie, 15% of his traffic comes from paid ads on Google. The majority of that is search campaigns and performance max campaigns. And Eddie, I don't think we're giving away the secret sauce here when we say that what we're trying to get, traffic on is when people search for Harper's Ferry vacation rentals, Harper's Ferry cabin. Both those concepts convert well for Eddie. That's the majority of what those paid ad traffic looks like for his particular website. And then the bottom piece that I would say there, email. It's not the highest volume of traffic. It's less than 10% of our website traffic, but email for Eddie is the second best converting channel. So our paid search is kind of like a very narrowly defined set of keywords that converts really well. Obviously, Eddie pays though every time there's a click on that ad, we're paying a fee, and luckily it's profitable. But that is a factor of that ad channel and how much traffic we get from it. But email for us, there's no real incremental cost in sending an email. And over time, working with StayFi, working on that platform, the list that Eddie has gotten bigger and bigger. So the email traffic has gone up, which is a great thing. But the email traffic for us converts very well. So if people click from an email, it's like the second most likely thing that they would click on before they make a reservation, which is great because that number will only grow over time. So that's the mix of where, the traffic comes from. And I would say this is a little bit typical. If I could nitpick a touch or just kind of, say something out loud, maybe it would be that Eddie's social media traffic is a little bit lower than other clients we work with, but he also gets way better conversion rates than other clients from other channels. So, there's a lot of ways to win. There's not only one way to win. And I think the formula you see on the screen is a pretty successful one that people can mimic.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing to that question about how do you assess revenue from direct channel versus OTAs and whether it's profitable or not. The hardest piece of that puzzle is what Conrad mentioned before is that perhaps OTAs are not going to deliver you all the demand you need. So at some point, does your marketing produce incremental direct bookings that fill nights that otherwise would have gone unbooked? And obviously, theoretically, those are much more valuable than just cannibalizing OTA bookings, although it can be hard to distinguish what that delta really is because it's always going to be a mix of cannibalization and net new bookings that may have not occurred or kind of leading into the PriceLabs part of the discussion, may have occurred at a lower price at a date closer to that stay. Um,
And that's where the math, Arthur, can get really complex really quickly because there is a lot of data out there. And I don't know, Eddie, I don't think we prepared this for right now, but it's something probably worth looking at or thinking about. But if someone is a direct booking and they book further in advance, so that means they're probably booking at a higher rate, they cancel at a lower rate, and they leave us better reviews, and we have less risk of other bad problems happening, a really bad guest or something like that. Some of those things we could put dollar signs next to. Some of those things we can't. So it's that's where the value of the direct booking does become a little bit more of like is it a company philosophy that we're going to focus on direct bookings and get them? And I'm actually more okay with it than maybe some people might think, with this idea of people kind of ignoring the direct bookings and not focusing on it and focusing just on the OTA bookings, as long as they know the downsides or the risks of that strategy. I think what I don't like to see, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Arthur, is people who have this strategy, of getting all these OTA bookings and they never kind of acknowledge the other side of it. I just think you have to be very thoughtful about what your approach is, and I don't think you should like dip your toe in the water. I think broadly speaking, if you're going to make this a focus, I think you have to make it a focus, for it to really move the needle. Otherwise, you're just going to be getting, that 5%, 6% direct. So.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about kind of some of the pitfalls later, but definitely direct bookings, like Eddie mentioned, it's not overnight. It takes even like the SEO organic traffic. That's gonna take a long time to incrementally build over time. Same with an email list, same with building, trust and loyalty amongst guests who come again and again. All of these things take time. So there's not one silver bullet that will lead to overnight success. So just kind of pulling back for a second, I'll just kind of review at a high level quickly kind of all the things we talked about, and then we're going to dive into some more specific case studies and examples. So number one, obviously, is this all starts with if you are a professional operator, you probably have a property management software, and then all of those typically have a website tool. I know people were asking for the website for HudsonCreativeStudio.com. I said group, but it's studio.com. In all those PMS, though, if you go to the website builder section, they're going to have all of the partners that they can build websites with. Some are going to be less expensive, some will be custom and more expensive. And Hudson Creative Group is definitely a great one of those options. Pricing will obviously play in a role. How do you want to preference guests to book directly? Well, of course, not giving everything away. And then how does that strategy evolve over time? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the details of how do you actually collect more guest data, which is very important if you especially are currently all or nearly all OTA dependent. And then Conrad also will kind of show you more of the details of what his services do and what the different types of marketing options are. So now I know we haven't had you talk that much, just Amber, so I do apologize. But do you want to talk a little bit more about dynamic pricing and the role it plays in this direct booking ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I love the conversation that we're having today. I love being a part of direct booking conversations because I think it's so important to remember that as operators get, more experience in the space and, kind of similar to Eddie's story, you really, really want to start investing and having a direct booking website. And the reason I say that is that in general, revenue management can be defined as, finding the right price for the right guest at the right time and on the right channel. It takes all of those pieces together, and there are strategies around all of those pieces together that make up revenue management. And from my perspective, just to kind of sort of set the stage, so to speak, I think that the audience that books on OTAs is different than the audience that's going to book direct. I think that the audience that books direct is a loyal guest or a guest that has the strongest potential to be a loyal guest. And when you're talking about conversion and the, forecasting and the odds of conversion, a lot higher with direct than with OTAs. So your direct shot, and I'm echoing what has been said before, but I agree that your direct site should always be the lowest total price, not necessarily because of discounts, but because on the OTAs, you're giving a piece of your commission away. And, when thinking about that and trying to calculate that, and would love to pose this question that we have at the bottom of the slide, it's like, how many of you actually know what percentage of your bookings are direct? And of you that know that, how many of you know if your direct price is less than the OTA prices? Because you really need to watch out for the OTA specific promotions. Now, that can get complicated just from a solution like PriceLabs because we are sending a rate that is not necessarily the rate you're going to see on the OTA if you're playing in that game of OTA promotions. I call it a game because to me, I feel like it's a game. I feel like you have to pay to play on the OTAs. You've got to play this game and keep up with how their algorithm works to have decent rankings. And it's just, while I think that that is an audience that you still want to be, investing in, and you still want to get some of your bookings from the OTAs, I personally don't want to play that game all day. I want to make sure that I am somehow capturing the guest information, making sure I'm remarketing, making sure I've got this direct booking website and all the other, amazing organic aspects of getting that traffic to your website. I want to invest more in that than continually playing the OTA game. And if you're playing the OTA game and you're using these promotions to improve your rankings, well, that's when you run the risk of having your OTA price cheaper than your direct booking price. It's also important to point out that when you've captured this traffic to your direct booking website, you're not going to be cross-shopped, right? So guests can't compare you to, necessarily. This can get complicated now that people are getting really savvy with AI tools, AI browser tools that can have multiple browsers open. And you can ask this AI to give you the best price possible on the browsers or on the tabs you're on, things like that. So it getting a little interesting and tricky when you bring AI tools into the conversation like that. But still, generally speaking, you're not being cross-shopped with your competition, right? So you've got the prime pricing power on that direct booking website. And the last thing I will say is that using PriceLabs, a tool like PriceLabs, dynamic pricing really should be thought of as optimizing your pricing and not a way to discount, right? So using things like last minute pricing or occupancy based adjustments instead of those OTA promotions can put you at a competitive price point with your competition while also still giving you that element of control to make sure that the OTA price is still slightly higher than your direct price.
Yeah.
Yeah, some data points I'll just add on to this, especially if you're relying on things like last minute price reductions to fill, you know, empty, rooms that have not been booked or empty properties. All the data that we have shows that direct bookings typically happen further in advance, and because they're happening further in advance, they're typically also happening at a higher price point than otherwise may have been booked at in the future. So I don't know, Conrad, if you generally agree with that direct booking can actually help you from having to reduce prices using tools like PriceLabs as those dates approach.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of the dirtiest things I've seen happen over the last 10 years is like the pricing tools are doing what they should be doing, by the way. So it's not a negative comment on Price Labs or anything, but just this fact of the guest, we're incentivizing the guest to wait, unfortunately, aren't we? If the guest is not particularly tied in or excited about booking a specific listing or looking at a specific type of home, if they feel like, hey, there's going to be options available, again, see markets with significant inventory growth, we reward them a little bit too much for waiting, and then they can book last minute and get a great deal. And I don't think that's just the software connected hosts that are doing that, property managers are doing that. I think that's everybody. I think that's all the OTAs that want that. They'd rather sell it for something than sell it for nothing. That's how their business model works. And I think a lot of people see occupancy if it's lower than normal as a really dirty sign, or a really bad sign, even though again, I can show you a lot of clients we work with that have quote unquote below average occupancy, but significantly better than average RevPAR, in revenue coming from each listing because they know what to charge and when to attract those people into the mix there. So yeah, I think you have to be very careful of it, right? Because these tools are great, and at the same token, they do have some downside risk in how you're allowing people and what you're training the guests to do. The analogy I always do, it's kind of a dead company now. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Bed Bath and Beyond. Maybe some people might be aware of it, but they had these 20% off coupons that they sent, and it got to the point where people in my family, like my mom or my wife, or I mean, heck, even me, like I bought stuff there before I went to college. You would not go to Bed Bath and Beyond unless you have the 20% off coupon because it was such a significant discount for the products. So you were demotivated to go to that store and purchase something, which is not what a retail store should be wanting you to do, right? Like in theory, you want these retail stores to be pushing repeat purchases, pushing more visits. That's how you get more revenue, because we train the customer on the fact that there's a 20% coupon coming right around the corner. So discounting and understanding what the rate is that someone's willing to pay is super important. You should absolutely use something like PriceLabs to understand it. But I think you have to be very careful of like, I think these tools are like knives and you can easily cut yourself on them if you don't kind of know what you're doing with them, unfortunately.
On
Yeah.
that slide, let me just jump in and echo all of this. I mean, these are all things that we're doing at Mountain Mama. So like we are never using OTA discount promos. There's no need because instead we use Price Labs and we're using Price Labs to handle that last minute pricing, occupancy based adjustments, et cetera. You can still execute on all the things that the OTA discounts offer while still ensuring that you're always cheapest on your own direct booking site. So if you're using a quality pricing tool like PriceLabs, you still have all that control, you still have that flexibility while still ensuring that the direct booking price is going to be cheapest. And again, I agree. You don't have to discount a huge amount on your direct bookings. You're just accounting for the fact that you're now not paying that OTA fee. So if you're paying 15% of the total booking value to Airbnb, you can just by removing that 15%, you can actually have a higher nominal price, like the rent price could actually be higher on your direct booking site. But because the guest isn't paying, because we pass on all those OTA fees, even if Airbnb is charging us, we're still passing those on to the guest one way or another. And when the guest isn't paying that, they can get a cheaper price on the direct booking site while we actually are taking home more and splitting a bigger pie with the homeowners whose homes we're managing.
Yeah, and we haven't even touched on where direct booking strategy plays into property management in terms of attracting owners, which I'm sure we can touch on at the very end. But it's also like You can imagine if property managers who are more successful at direct bookings also have higher ability to attract and retain owners because they are typically financially performing better on their behalf. So now, Conrad, do you want to just dive into a little more detail about all the specific tactics that you're running for Mountain Mama? And then I know on the next slide, we actually have some examples of what these look like.
Yeah, I want to take your thread you just opened, and I'll tie that into the next few things that I'll say over the next minute or two. But I'll say this: we get to work with a wide variety of clients of all different shapes and sizes, right? In terms of number of units they're managing and stuff like that. And whenever we get the opportunity to work with a very large client, like sometimes that we get an opportunity to work with the biggest client in a given market, these tier one, high demand markets. I promise you, they're never lacking for homeowner leads. I mean, very, very rarely are they. So homeowner leads are distributed extremely unequally. It's actually like how dating apps work, by the way. Like matches are distributed very unequally. It's the same thing with how homeowners choose who they want to reach out to and consider managing their property because they are drawn to the company that has a really strong brand, that has a really strong website, that has a really strong, appearance of doing good guest marketing. We could debate in the back end a little bit of how strong those guest marketing things actually are. But why would a homeowner choose someone who's just coming up, who has two listings, who doesn't maybe have the same, brand? Like imagine if I started a company tomorrow and tried to compete with Eddie, that'd be a very stupid idea for me to do. But why would anyone ever choose me over Eddie when Eddie has this, now half a decade of experience? He's got this beautiful website. He's all these reviews. Like it is significantly more, the homeowner is significantly more confident in choosing someone like an Eddie in Harper's Ferry because he has all the proof that he does a great job. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say on that, which is that when you're doing a great job with guest marketing, the fun little side effect is that it typically does benefit your homeowner marketing quite a bit as well, because homeowners are often very smart people, and most people don't get to the spot in life where they can start to buy second, third, fourth, fifth vacation homes without maybe having some business knowledge or some marketing knowledge, maybe in their day-to-day lives, what they might do. So they see a really strong big operator and they go, I'm just going to reach out to that guy and then maybe two or three other guys that are pretty big in the market. And again, that's why when we work with these big companies, we have clients that get 40, 50 homeowner leads a week. And then might work with a smaller operator that's scraping by and getting one or two leads. And those leads are not distributed equally by any stretch of the imagination. So just kind of hammering your point home there. But yeah, going into like what gives Eddie companies like Mount Mama that visibility, I kind of hit on these 3 points, which sometimes I feel like a broken record. If people have listened to any stuff that I've done before, maybe they've heard these three before: search, social, and let's just call it outbound marketing, if we want to say that. Email plus SMS. I know we've focused more a little bit on our conversation today on email, but a lot of our clients are doing SMS as well. But they're roughly in order. So I would say search for us. This is the analogy that I'm doing, and I know everyone kind of wants to write the obituary for Google, and platforms like ChatGPT are going to kill Google. Here's kind of my analogy, if this makes any sense to folks listening in. Google's kind of like this massive glacier. Like it's sitting, it's between these oceans, and it's huge, right? Like it has all the search traffic. A lot of people that are doing their travel planning, the number one thing they're still going to today is Google. And then the analogy that I'm doing is all these LLM platforms, pick your poison. I just put ChatGPT in the slides here, but you can pick whatever tool you want. They're like a boat pulled up on the side of the glacier, and they have like an ice pick, and they're like slamming at the edge of the glacier, and they're chipping off like little tiny bits of the glacier. So I do think Google search is getting a little bit smaller year over year. But if we were to throw Eddie's analytics data up on the screen, it'd be very similar to a lot of our clients, where he might have gotten 5,000 referrals for the past few weeks from Google, both organic and paid traffic, and he might have gotten 40 from ChatGPT, right? So it's like the imbalance right now is still so clear and obvious that like you're focusing on your Google traffic is the best thing for you to be doing. Now, I'm not saying that that means you should ignore or not think about the future and what the future might hold with people using so-called LLM search models or things like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, et cetera, to find, and plan their trips. I think there's some of that that's already happening. I think that will continue to grow. But again, to ignore the glacier, in expense of a few chunks of ice, I think is a bit of a misstep that a lot of people are making right now. And I think maybe it's just because there's some desire for something new. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we don't have to worry about Google anymore? We can so-called try to optimize for ChatGPT or OpenAI. So I'd be very cautious and careful of that. And the last kind of search comment I'll say there is that paid and organic focus together, I think, is important. I think the truth is that even if you rank number one in Google organically for a keyword like Harper's Ferry vacation rentals or cabin rentals, as Eddie's website does, you're not going to get all the traffic, unfortunately. The way that the search results actually come into Google now, 30 to 40% of clicks still go to paid results. So SEO is great. We want to focus on the organic traffic and we want to get what we can, but just know that like that's probably, if there is something that's being picked away a little bit more aggressively, it's keywords like things to do in Harper's Ferry or best restaurants or, top grocery stores to visit. I think Eddie has one in mind that he could choose there. Those are all content keywords that have been chewed away a little bit more aggressively from the way that Google's laying out the search results. Ads, are still that valuable tool in the tool belt to come in and get more targeted traffic. So I would hate for someone to be like too focused on SEO to where they miss the forest through the trees, and they realize that 30-40% of traffic on a very high intent booking search goes to paid clicks. Don't ignore those because they're very valuable. Now you have to set up your website and all the tracking and everything we talked about earlier so that paid actually works for you. And that's not an easy task. I can acknowledge that and recognize that. But there's some folks that I've encountered over the years, and I don't know why, but they're just like anti-advertising. They just don't want to do advertising. And I think that's a bit of a intentionally handicapping your success that you might have with direct if you're not willing to do advertising. You just got to figure out what's going to work well for your business, your model. The phrase I hear all the time is like, I'll never outspend Airbnb. And I'm like, well, that's okay. You're trying to fill X number of homes. Airbnb is trying to fill Y number of homes. So of course they're going to spend more because they're trying to fill a much wider pool of demand. So it's sort of a non sequitur when people say that. Never like that. Social, here's kind of the way that I think about it. Social media is 100% interruption content, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to capture the right people, but it's not necessarily in their moment of booking, right? So I think the way that I think about great social content is that it creates desire. They see a photo, they see a video, they see a gallery, they see a nicely edited reel showing off Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. They see that content and then they're drawn into it and they want to click in and learn more about it. So they didn't go on Facebook or on Instagram to look for cabin rentals. They would probably do that on Google. All the data indicates that, but it doesn't mean that we can't show an ad to someone or show organic content to someone that can create desire and makes them want to travel to a specific location. We could probably do a whole hour on what that actually format actually looks like, but just know that like that is a very valuable tool in the tool belt. I think that if you're smaller, you're probably best focusing the majority of your paid social media budget on very bottom funnel content. So what I mean by that is you call it whatever you want, warm audience, people that are likely to book. But in my mind, if you're going to do paid at first on social, you're focusing on your website visitors, your email list of past guests. You can actually upload your StayFi email list to something like Meta and then retarget people that are on that email list if they have a Facebook account. About 60 to 70% of email addresses that you upload from StayFi probably will, by the way, according to our data that we work on when we get an email list from StayFi. That's kind of the typical average. So you're able to retarget people who are a warmer audience. You're not showing it to people that are like never heard of you or not familiar with you, that sort of thing. And in a market like Eddie's, he actually knows, by the way, what type of location people are typically coming from, maybe some of their age characteristics, what they like to do, that sort of thing. So in Meta and Facebook and Instagram, you can build audiences that are so-called cold audiences, but they have a significantly higher chance of conversion than if you're just blasting ads out, without any care in the world of who they're showing to. So I think in a perfect world, you have both paid and organic content rolling. But if you're going to start with something at first on paid social media, running Meta ads, I would focus on that bottom funnel, your email list, website visitors, and people that already follow you on social media currently, Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing. And then email, I want to be aware of time here. Arthur, again, I'm sure we could do an hour just on all the email tactics that you could use once you get the email addresses from StayFi. But I think this is kind of my new three things that I say a lot: collect, customize it, and then message it. I would say we have work to do on those last two bits. And AI, I think, is going to play a super important role in that. But I think collect is the most important. You want some kind of offline collection tool. Obviously, we're big fans of StayFi. I think that's the best one out there. There are other ways to collect offline emails, but they're all subpar, in my opinion, to using StayFi. So I'd highly recommend that. Then I think you want to, to the best of your ability, customize messages going forward. Here's properties you might be interested in. Here's content from my blog about information, things to do, that sort of thing. And then ultimately use your email list. Like I will take someone who's sending quote unquote subpar emails and is actually doing it consistently over some people that we deal with. And I'm sure the people, Arthur, who collect their emails endlessly and they have a list of 5,000 people, but they never actually message them. Because what actually happens to that email list over time is that the quality of it decays. It actually gets worse and worse over time if you're not actively marketing and messaging it. So couldn't be more of a fan of like, just send your emails. I want them to be great, but if they're not great, you're actually better off sending something that's okay. And just kind of figuring out, from there, how you can make it stronger as you go along.
Yeah, I'll only add to that. I think, you want to be authentic to your brand with your email marketing. And if you are a solo owner operator with two listings or a smaller property manager, no one's expecting you to have the most slick, branded, professional looking email marketing. And with tools like StayFi or MailChimp, you can make emails that are still very professional looking with no email marketing background. But don't be worried about it being perfect because being overly perfect and manicured, it probably is not going to align with like your authentic brand anyways. And then Conrad, I do have just some general examples here of what Mountain Mama looks like across all these different types of advertising and organic platforms you mentioned.
Yeah, just a few examples. So the four screenshots on the left are all different ad units that Eddie has active right now. So whether and this is run through Google Ads in what's called a Performance Max campaign. So if you're searching, you're going to find Eddie on Google, just regular search. If you are on, let's say, a news website or a sports website, you're reading an article, you're going to see display ad. If you read content or you're focused on Harper's Ferry, you're going to see an ad for Eddie. If you're on your Gmail inbox, you might see an ad from Eddie in there as well. If you are watching YouTube, you might see an ad pop up to click over and book as well. So those are kind of those screenshots on the left. Those are all Performance Max Google Ads campaigns. The screenshot on the right is actually a search. If you do a search on Google, Harper's Ferry Cabin Rentals, not only you'll notice is that Eddie ranks number one in Google search. That's obviously great. He actually has the knowledge panel, which is very rare. We have very few clients that have actually achieved that knowledge panel on the right side. So Google is literally recommending Mountain Mama as the best cabin rental company in Harper's Ferry, and that's through a lot of the content work and other project work that has occurred collectively, working with Eddie over the last few years. But yeah, he does well there, and he gets a significant portion of his traffic through Google Organic as well.
And I will say the 747 five-star reviews here on the business profile is super impressive and
Incredible.
something that Google also is looking at for SEO. And in StayFi, we do have a like a text collection tool which will help you collect more five-star Googles and Google ratings. And then personally for me, I always find that Google, once you have a pretty well-established local brand, I do find that Google tends to prefer it in organic search over the big OTAs. And I think they probably would never say this, but I think it's because they obviously want those OTAs to spend a significant part of their marketing budget with Google.
You can see the bottom of the screenshot there, can't you, Arthur, right? Eddie is
Yes.
outranking Airbnb, Vrbo, Home to Go. I don't think there's ever been a Vacasa that's been that prominent in his market, but in many
Yeah.
of the markets we have, we're outranking Vacasa and other, large national brands. And I'm not saying anything negative about those brands. I'm just saying that Eddie's one market, one manager in one market. He does not have all the inventory. He has a good chunk of it, and I would argue some of the higher quality inventory, but he doesn't have all of it. And he's outranking all those folks. So this idea of, oh, I'm small, I have no chance of outranking the big guys. Here's an example right here. Here's your proof right here that that's absolutely possible.
I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'm going to move through these slides pretty quickly. But essentially, I just kind of want to pivot to data collection because I know Conrad mentioned, and Eddie mentioned that part of your marketing strategy has to be how do I actually collect data from all the guests? And there are a ton of options out there, including StayFi. And obviously, we're best known for collecting data through the Wi-Fi, which I'll show you in a second. But there are also other great tools. We have this within StayFi as well, which is to collect guest emails with different types of forms that you send to the booker in advance. This obviously is an adequate solution, but I will say that it tends to only yield the booker's email and information, and it's harder to get after the non-booking guests, which obviously, if you are using Wi-Fi, you're going to collect non-booking guest data. And then when you have larger properties, that can be a significant number of people, as I'm sure you guys know. There is typically some email data that you can use in your property management software already, especially if you are getting a good mix of non-Airbnb reservations. That's one thing that StayFi can help you pull out as well. And then finally, if you do have a website, whether it's built through the PMS or through one of these partners that Eddie mentioned, Hudson Creative Studio, or any of the other partners in the PMS ecosystem, typically you want to integrate sign-up forms, pop-up forms on your website because if you are spending money on social media or on advertising or on organic search, if you can just capture emails on your website, it kind of extends the value of all of that marketing because if the guests don't book in that moment, they may book after receiving some amount of email marketing from you. This very quickly is what the Wi-Fi guest data collection experience looks like. So guest selects your Wi-Fi network. Then the splash page will appear on that device. And here's an example from Mountain Mama, which can be branded by home. Then we take guests to a page where they can kind of gather or look at essential resources, things like a guidebook, book this property again. And then, of course, you can right away start automating marketing to those guests, whether it's text messaging or emails or both, to everybody immediately after you start collecting. So in StayFi, I know in this case, Mountain Mama uses MailChimp, I believe. In StayFi, we also have a very similar email marketing tool that you can use. All of these tools are fantastic, and my number one recommendation is if you are using email marketing tools or you purchase one, make sure you are sending content regularly. That is the biggest mistake that we see. And then when it comes to what to set up first, I always recommend people set up automations first, or a drip campaign, as it's sometimes called, because basically, when you start collecting data, you want to make sure guests are receiving some number of emails on a regular basis, and automations are the best place to start because you can set up one campaign and it'll be automatically sent to everybody through all the different lists that you're collecting. So with StayFi, for instance, we always have a Wi-Fi welcome campaign that you can kind of launch that's already been pre-built for you, a campaign that goes out post-departure, and then we also have an automated stay anniversary campaign as an example where we send an email like 6, 7, 8 months post their last reservation to remind them to book again. And you can see here on the right, the stay anniversary email for this operator has over 70% open rate. So triggering emails based on some data point of collection or milestone in terms of anniversary will yield better open rates and click-through rates than just the monthly newsletter, which is also important. So that would be the other thing is once you're set up automations to make sure you're sending an email when they log into the Wi-Fi or sending an email when they submit data on your website. Then after that, you want to layer in at least one newsletter per month. I would recommend doing this once you have around 500 people on your list. I say 2 times a month, more popular with our customers who are the most successful. And then in these campaigns, you can send general newsletters, so things to do in the area, 3 reasons to visit XYZ destination, all of that typical content. A lot of the times, if you are doing blog posts, related back to that blog post, what you just published. Promo campaigns, that's also very helpful. If you don't have Google Analytics e-commerce, promo codes are kind of the next best option for attribution. Because if you have a code that's unique to a certain number of emails, you always know if you get a direct booking with this code that it came from this campaign. And then finally, we do have a very cool feature in StayFi where you can search your calendar, see which properties are available, and then insert them automatically into your emails. And this way, you're making sure that you are not just advertising your properties, you're advertising the properties that need bookings. So a lot of the times, especially folks I saw here, we have people with smaller inventory counts. What you don't want to be doing is sending a lot of emails, sending folks to properties that are fully booked, because then they're going to be disappointed. So we want to make sure the demand or the properties that we are advertising in our newsletters and campaigns are able to be booked by guests for the date periods that we're advertising. Like if you're sending a July 4th email, make sure, with this tool, or just make sure if you're using any tool that you can actually book those properties for July 4th. And then you can actually fill those dates where you're looking to actually get bookings. I don't know if we want to, I feel like we can maybe skip this part, Conrad, as we're kind of running close to the end of the webinar here.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe in after people can check out the slide later. If they have questions, just message me for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I will just add a few other things here that we see people do successfully. Other tactics in general in terms of how they're downshifting their Airbnb dependence. One very popular one, I would say popular, but one we see some people have success with is they actually open their direct calendar before their OTA calendar, whatever length of time that is. So letting their email list know, their loyal audience, hey, for this very popular time of year, maybe it's July 4th, New Year's, Christmas, whatever it is for your destination, it's just available on the website, and then we release it on OTAs. The other one is if Airbnb is the one you want to get away from the fastest, it's not just is my direct price less than my Airbnb price, it's Airbnb is the most expensive, then other channels, then direct. And the other thing I would always make sure is that when you Google the names of your properties on OTAs, that your direct booking website is listed pretty high up in the results for that property. So we see a lot of guests getting pretty savvy. They are Googling the names of properties, and it needs to be easy to find that property on your direct website. Yeah, so now I will just we actually talked all about all the things that's what's working and not working. We covered kind of all of these different topics throughout the presentation. So I think we'll just kind of go to the end of the presentation now as we're at the hour to the question and answer section. And before that, we do have some great promo codes for you guys. So for StayFi, we have promo code roundtable, which is 50% off the first 3 months. For BuildUp Bookings, we have code, which will give someone $500 off the setup fee. And then for PriceLabs, we have roundtable PL for PriceLabs for 15% off first 3 months after your free trial. So feel free to take a screenshot photo of this if you want to use these. Now, if people have a few extra minutes, happy to go through some of these questions. I know we answered them already.
I tried to grab what I could, Arthur, while you were going through some of your things, at least for
Yeah.
things that were relevant on my side. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the question for you, Conrad, is that I know we have some people on this webinar that have 1, 2, 3 listings, maybe are an owner operator, obviously probably can't afford like a more boutique service like you offer. Kind of where would you recommend someone who's on the smaller side who doesn't have much of a budget start?
I still think that your best wins are going to come from your warm audiences. So, reaching out to past guests and having that be a key part of your strategy. Like, I think StayFi makes sense truly. And I'm not just saying that because you're here, Arthur, whether you have one listing or 1,000. I truly believe it does make sense because having the ability to reach out to the guests and connect with them directly and offer them book again, I think that's, absolutely something that can offer a lot of value. I guess I'd be curious too, like, is their goal to grow? As their goals may dictate a little bit of the strategy going forward. If there's like, nope, I've got these three listings, it is what it is, that's all I have, then that's kind of one thing. I see one of the questions that you put up here live. I think I know the context of the person asking the question. And yeah, like I think from memory, she's in a very competitive market. There are many larger property managers in that market. I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, this is all super easy and straightforward. I think some of these things are actually challenging to do. I'm not going to dispute that. I think the world we're in now, though, that we were not in 2 years ago, is you have a pretty skilled marketer available for about $20 a month. And his name is Claude, or her name is Claude, or their name is Claude, I guess whatever you want to call it. And I think that as a small manager, if you're sort of saying to yourself, well, I don't have the budget to hire a freelancer or an agency or a specialist to do at least full-time work, I think you can get really far with using some of the resources that a lot of people like. I like to think that we put out a lot of free resources people can check out and learn from. I like to think that you can learn a lot from communities, groups, going to events like VRMA, and then implementing a lot of that with, learning it yourself and doing it through an AI system like Claude. Like that is not a thing that existed 24 months ago. And now I think truly you can make a lot of progress doing, emails now. You can design emails in Claude and paste them into your StayFi thing and do a lot of work there. So my tenants don't change, like search, social, and outbound traffic, I still think are the things that you can focus on. Your quantity is going to be lower, but again, you need fewer bookings. Maybe for you, winning with direct bookings might be getting 10 direct bookings a year for each listing. That's something that you can do in maybe a few hours a week. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll
those
just
those are my
add
thoughts.
that in StayFi, our email marketing tool is totally free once you connect your
Awesome.
PMS. And if you have under 200, or I can't remember, either 200 or 250 contacts. So you can connect your PMS, upload your list of 150 past guests that you might have, and start emailing right away for free. And as part of that, you can use our pre-arrival forms, so not the Wi-Fi tool, for free as well. So you can start collecting data, at least from the booker, on a pretty regular basis. So I would say there are free-ish tools. So that at least starts out on a free plan until your list grows to a certain size that you can get started with, because the warm audience who's booked with you, stayed with you, loves a property, that's going to be the easiest one to go after. Um, yeah, and I think we answered pretty much all the questions in the chat. And of course, as I mentioned before, thanks everybody for attending. And I'd like to thank Conrad, Amber, and Eddie for being here and taking time out of their Wednesday to do this webinar. I think it was super helpful. And the final thing is, if you missed part of this or want to go back, it will be published on the StayFi YouTube channel pretty shortly thereafter. And of course, if you're interested in any of these products, you can, of course, go to any of these websites, use these promotions, and I'm sure there's contact information on those websites if you need more information as well. So again, thank you everybody so much for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.